Mr. Moulton is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Milley and Secretary Austin, my first question to you at our hearing on June 23rd was, why have you not started the evacuation of our allies already? You responded that we have a, quote, moral imperative to save the Afghans who work by our side. Secretary Austin, you said earlier today that moving too slow with the evacuation would put our troops at risk. So I want to know what you did personally, all three of you, between that June 23rd hearing and August 15th when Kabul fell to meet that moral imperative. Now, I hope it's a long list of things, so I'll take that for the record. But let me ask you this. Do you believe you did enough, Chairman Milley?
I do. I think that we provided the advice necessary at the time. I think, yes.
Secretary Austin.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you heard me say in my opening comments that we engaged state early on to provide input to their decision-making process on when to move the SIVs. And
I understand that, Mr. Secretary. You said that you and the State Department followed the advice of the Ghani government that taking out SIVs would precipitate a government collapse. Yet the vast majority of these heroes weren't even working for us or the government anymore because they supported a force of up to 100,000 U.S. troops over 20 years. And we only had 2,500 troops left. So why on earth did you trust President Ghani?
Again, not my decision. To your point, I had input to that decision-making process, but it's not as if I was influenced by President Ghani.
I understand, Mr. Secretary. So you've said this repeatedly, that this is state's responsibility. What responsibility do you have for the Afghans who stood shoulder to shoulder with our troops, and how many do you commit to getting out by the end of the year?
I have a responsibility to get out as many as I can over time, and how many do I commit to getting out? Every one that I can.
General McKenzie, there are DoD reports that DoD reduced airstrikes as early as May, when troops were just beginning to withdraw, then had to ramp them back up after the Taliban gained ground. There are also reports that you sat down with the Taliban leadership in August, drew a circle around Kabul, and told them that if the Taliban fighters went inside that circle, they would get hit with U.S. airstrikes. So why did you let up on the Taliban first at the beginning of May, and then at the end of our withdrawal in August, right when we should have been hitting them harder to give Americans and Afghan partners time to evacuate?
Representative, the report about me meeting with the Taliban and telling me if they came inside a 30-kilometer circle around Kabul is simply factually incorrect.
Okay, what about May?
In May, as through the rest of our redeployment period, we continued strikes on the Taliban. Those strikes, however, were limited to support of Afghan forces in close combat. We were not striking deep, and we did not have a tremendous amount of resources compared to resources that we've had in the past. So those strikes, while effective in certain tactical situations, at no time were enough to change the strategic calculus of the campaign.
General McKenzie, you went from 2,500 troops in Afghanistan in April to 650 in July, and then turned around and put 5,000 back into Kabul. Now, you've said repeatedly that you personally believe the Afghan government would fall if we didn't maintain a certain number of troops in country. So why didn't you plan for an evacuation and leave enough troops on the ground to conduct it?
So let's be very clear. The evacuation has to be ordered by the Department of State. The drawdown of U.S. forces was ordered by the President in April and completed in July. The non-combatant evacuation operation is a separate mission, and it was not completely under the control of the Department.
So you're going to fall back on the bureaucracy, the divide between DOD and state?
Well, Representative, I'm going to fall back on the orders that I
out and then had to put more back in?
I'm going to fall back on the orders that I receive, Representative.
Secretary Austin, you presided in part over the withdrawal of forces from Iraq, though I know you at times requested more troops on the ground. 2 years later, we had to send thousands of troops back into Iraq. Do you believe we will ever have to send troops back into Afghanistan?
Well, I certainly want to engage in a hypothetical. I would just say that obviously that's a decision that has to be made by the President. You know, while I won't rule anything out, I would just say it's not preordained that we will go back or have to go back into Afghanistan again. So, but if we do, the military will provide good, credible options to be able to do that and to be effective. On the strikes,
gentlemen, you and your predecessors asked tens of thousands of young Americans to fight in Afghanistan, and they did. And thousands died. And now you keep saying that our troops should be proud of that. Well, here's a question sent to me by one of those soldiers. In 20 years, our troops on the ground never lost a single battle, yet we lost the war. And we're
The
losing it
gentleman's
over
time
and over
has
again
expired.
the longer we leave
And
our allies
The gentleman's
behind.
time has
So
expired.
what is left to be proud of?
Seth, we're trying to run a meeting here. And if you wanted to read that letter, you should have read it in the first 5 minutes when you have time. So I think it's something we need to hear, and it's something we should have heard during the 5 minutes that you had. The gentleman's time has expired.